The upper part, you have the plasma. The center, you have the buffy coat. And the down part, you have the packed cell. It is this packed cell you measure to get the percentage of red blood cell in the cell. And that is otherwise known as the packed cell volume or hematocrit count or packed cell value. So, that buffy layer is the aggregation. The buffy layer we are talking about is because of the aggregation of white blood cells and platelets. It is the aggregation of white blood cells and platelets that form the buffy layer, which is otherwise known as the buffy coat. The upper part, when you separate red blood cell, like I said before, when you separate red blood cell, you're going to have the plasma at the top, the buffy layer at the center, and I said the buffy layer at the center is the aggregation between the white blood cell and the platelets. We form the buffy layer or the buffy coat. And the down part of it is the packed cell. And that is what you measure, which is expressed in percentage. And that now gives birth to what? Packed cell volume. That will now take us to the functions of blood. What are the functions of blood? Blood have various functions. Number one is the nutritive function. In terms of nutritive function, after digestion, the food that is catabolized, the food that is broken down into smaller particles, they cannot just get to the end organs. They cannot just get to the tissue. They have to be reabsorbed. And when they are reabsorbed through intravascular processes, they enter into circulation through blood. Like for example, in the GIT, hepatic portal vein carried digested particles from the GIT to the circulatory system. And what transports these substances is the blood. Is the blood that transports these substances. Is the blood. That is in terms of nutritive function. Then number two, that is respiratory function. Blood equally have a role to play in respiratory function. How? During respiration, when you breathe in oxygen, the oxygen is trapped in the alveoli. When it's trapped in the alveoli, that is what we call systemic circulation. The oxygen will enter into circulation to the end organs, and carbon dioxide is returned, that is venous return, back to the alveoli and is expelled. You know, when the pressure gradient of carbon dioxide is greater than the pressure gradient of oxygen, the CO2 will leave the circulation. It is blood that is able to carry out this function in terms of respiratory function. Then number three is excretory function. Blood equally carry out excretory function after metabolic activities in the cell. It is the red blood cell, like in the kidney, in the skin, in the liver, that is those organs. It with the help of blood that those substances will be excreted from the cell, like during glomerular filtration. It is with the help of blood. The next function of blood is transport of hormones and enzymes. When enzymes are produced or they are secreted in the ductless gland, after secretion of these hormones, I said hormones are secreted from ductless gland. After the secretion, they should be transported to the end organs where they will be utilized. It is blood that carried them to the specific end organ where their effects or their role are needed. It is blood. Same thing applicable to enzymes. And enzymes can be produced in a particular part of the tissue or the organ, and their effect will be in another what? Tissue. So it is blood that will transport these either enzymes or hormones. The next function of blood is regulation of water balance. This, in terms of blood, this helps in the regulation of water content of the body. Blood help in regulation of water balance in the body. Then the next function of blood is regulation of acid-base balance. How? Plasma protein and hemoglobins, they act as buffers and help in the regulation of acid-base balance. So let me repeat. Plasma protein, albumin, globulin, fibrinogens, they act as buffer. Hemoglobins act as buffer, and in terms they help in the regulation of acid-base balance in the body. And it is blood. They are all constituents in blood. The next function of blood is regulation of body temperature. In the intravascular system, there is increase in temperature. So the blood itself is able to checkmate the body temperature. So because it is high specific heat, the blood have high specific heat. Blood is responsible for maintaining the thermoregulatory mechanism in the body. That is the balance between heat loss and heat gain in the body. It is the blood. Then the next function of blood is the storage function. How do blood carry out storage function? Water and some important substances. Water and some important substances like proteins, like glucose. You know, glucose is in high demand in the brain. The only language the brain understands is glucose. And blood is a reservoir already made of all these substances. They are present in the blood. And when they are needed, the body can easily source for all these substances like water, like protein, like glucose, like sodium, like potassium. When there is fluid loss, when there is starvation, when there is electrolyte loss, like even for example, when there is electrolyte loss, the body can easily source for all these substances like sodium, potassium. Then another function of blood is defense function. How the blood carry out defense function? You know, I said earlier on that there are formed elements in terms of composition of blood. When I made mention of composition of blood, I said there are formed elements. And in terms of formed elements, the white blood cells, specifically neutrophils and monocytes, engulf the bacteria by phagocytosis. I recall the neutrophils and the monocytes engulf the bacteria by the process known as phagocytosis. Lymphocytes are involved in development of immunity. You can see when an individual immunity is improved, the individual will not easily get what? Ill. So it is the lymphocytes that is involved in the development of immunity. And eosinophils are responsible for the detoxification. When the liver is having issue, when you take in metabolites like drugs, it is the liver that will detoxify it. And it is the work of the eosinophils that will help the liver to undergo this detoxification and disintegration and removal of foreign proteins in the body. Thank you.